And without any further ado, I would like to officially welcome Mauricio Pochettino as the US Men's Soccer head coach.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Everybody, welcome back to the Insiders Lounge. Today we have another special episode and a little bit of a different episode. I'm sure as many of you have seen, Mauricio Pochettino has now signed as the US men's national team head coach. And so I've decided to do a little bit of an opinion-based podcast. We're bringing on Stewart, bringing on Dan. They're going to quickly introduce themselves and then we'll get right into the episode.
Yeah, thanks, Chad. Thanks for having me back. I graduated from college or university in the UK with a sports science and biology degree. Joined Prozone Sports, at the time a leader in performance analysis, trying to basically implement, event and tracking data into clubs using software and tech and trying to maximize kind of the performance analysis functionality within clubs. I started out in a club in the UAE with Al Jazeera, and I was there for 6 years. And then moved with Prozone to be the US general manager, working at all levels, of the US soccer pyramid, development academy, showcase games that started in 2011, working with the men's and women's national teams. I worked with the US men's national team in South Africa, more on the set pieces, and then, transitioned to, the women's side and helped there with a range of different kind of processes for the London Olympics and the World Cup in Canada. After that, I was 7 years at D.C. United as the technical director and general manager of their USL affiliate at the time, Loudoun United. And now I'm consulting with clubs, federations on, organizational strategy and design, team strategy and some transfers as well.
My name's Daniel Hall. I'm CEO of a multi-club ownership group called Club Underdog. We have 4 teams right now. One is in Italy, Serie C, Campobasso, which are actually playing at this moment. And we have a team in England called Dagenham and Redbridge, which are in the National League there. And on top of that, we are excited to have 2 Brooklyn franchises, Brooklyn FC. Brooklyn FC women are playing now in the USL Super League, the new women's Premier Division 1 league in the US. And we have Brooklyn FC men come into the USL in March of the new season in 2025. But it's great to be on and looking forward to having a great conversation.
All right, now that you've been introduced to both Dan and Stewart, I'm going to give you a quick rundown of what this episode's actually going to look like. We're going to be bouncing back between the 2 different point of views. Dan coming from a financial, investment, commercial point of view as he's a part of Club Underdog North 6 Group, and Stewart coming from his position as a former technical director in the MLS, as well as working with US Soccer. So let's first get into their initial reactions when they heard the news of Pochettino signing with the US men's national team.
I think it's a really exciting hire. I think, I think most of the country is pretty excited, right? I think when you've been involved at that international level and you've had a little bit of success in it, it's natural that you become a supporter and become a fan. And I think it's good timing for US Soccer. They've got a little bit of momentum on the back of obviously, hiring Gemma Hayes, which was a good hire, knows the landscape, knows the players. But I think it's a signing that they needed to do. And I think it was a pretty much a no-brainer, for those guys at US Soccer, even though you still have to execute the deal. I think it was pretty straightforward for them, given the quality of the candidates that was, one out of work and available, but also the level of quality of the coach. And, they're getting a top 5, probably worldwide coach who can draw in the Hispanic and Latino markets, who first and foremost is used to working with high quality, international players, and at a time where US Soccer needs to win. And I think, kudos to, Matt Crocker and those guys at US Soccer, who've probably had a little bit of a bumpy ride over the past few years. But I think this is a good hire. I think it's a good hire for US Soccer. I believe the contract is through the end of the World Cup, which I think is probably perfect for Pochettino. He can come in, stamp his authority, get to work right away. And it's not like they're working with a bunch of players that are downtrodden and not fit for purpose. I think it's a good opportunity for him to work with a good young bunch of players that can probably fit his style of play. And he wouldn't have taken this job, I don't think, if he didn't feel as though he could be successful. So the whole kind of aura around this kind of hire seems really positive, and I'm really looking forward to how it kind of shapes up in the first game.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great hire. I think it's a statement of intent by the USSF, and I think it's one that has potential to really take the team to the next level. So I certainly think it's a good hire. And, no disrespect to any predecessors, but I think it certainly shows a level of ambition and a certain caliber of coach coming in that really could help the USSF to do well in the World Cup coming up and get the best out of the players. You think about his record at Tottenham and Paris Saint-Germain and Chelsea in particular. He did a pretty good job all around there and is a great coach. In terms of what it means for us, I mean, on one level, increased buzz around the soccer ecosystem in the US is clearly a good thing, especially as anticipation builds for the World Cup in 26. We want people in the US to be watching a lot of soccer, both here and in Europe, and getting excited for the World Cup. And I think the more excited folks are about the World Cup and the prospects for the US national team, the more time and engagement they're going to spend in the US soccer ecosystem. So we really like the hire from both a perspective on the field and potential of performance, and also off the field for the the US soccer ecosystem and our franchise as a whole.
Now that we know both Stewart and Dan's initial reactions to Pochettino joining the US men's national team, I wanted to get a better understanding of the negotiation and hiring process. Why did Pochettino sign for the US, and why did the US want Pochettino as their new head coach leading up to the 2026 World Cup?
Yeah, first and foremost, I think, this is driven by the fact, obviously, that there is a World Cup on home soil, in 2 years' time. And US Soccer would probably realise that they have to be very aggressive, in terms of where they're looking to look for a head coach. They realise that they have a good bunch of players that probably need a fresh challenge, a fresh impetus. And first and foremost, I think, as I said before, I think the candidates that are available, that are, first of all, out of work, in general, you would look for people that are out of work, right? It doesn't cost you as much money to get them out of the contracts, even though, I believe that, there's probably going to be, a bit of gardening leave payment that US Soccer would have had to pay, but, nothing like probably the payment that they would have had to buy a head coach out of a current contract. So, I think in that first instance, they would have done a lot of kind of data analysis on Pochettino or the top clients that potential clients that they want to try and hire, and look to maximize the talent pool that they've already got. I think for Pochettino, probably they would had a checklist in terms of high quality coach, used to handling pressure, used to working with young players. Can he set the right culture? And you would go into these negotiations being quite aggressive, but being also quite aggressive to the representatives of Pochettino and his staff to say, do you want to do this? Because ultimately, they've got one shot at this, right? So it would have needed Pochettino to be very open to coming to the US and being wanting to develop the US and move it forward. And I think it's an unbelievable job to have. He would recognize, I think, being out of work as well, that this is a kind of a good challenge for him. As I say, he's not signing probably a 6-year contract, right? He's got a 2-year cycle right now to develop these players. And I think US Soccer have pushed the boat out quite rightly and got the best guy for the job. Now it's almost down to the coach, right? The pressure is not off, but US Soccer have hired the guy.
They've done their job.
It's the best possible hire that they could have made, I think. There's no time for, transitioning. There's no time for bedding in a young American coach. Although probably I think this will come with a stipulation that I would imagine that there's some kind of American-based coaches that are allowed to be close to this situation. I would pretty sure that would happen, given the fact that maybe if things don't go well, that there is a coach there on the US side that can learn and draw in some of this information and experience from being in a World Cup cycle. Because it's totally different. It's a totally different cycle than working at a club level. It's ruthless. Like, you have to win probably at least 7 games to progress to a World Cup final, and that's hard. That's completely different, and that will be the issues that this new coaching staff will face kind of moving forward.
Yes, so I think there's 2 factors, and this isn't actually that different to any hiring process, really. I think you need to look at performance and potential for performance, and also fit. And so, you want to get the best coach or manager that you can for your position. So, in our Serie C team, Campobasso, be realistic. We're not going to get Pep Guardiola to come and manage. He's in the Premier League. But so you want to get the best coach that you can get for your level. And I certainly think Pochettino is a top class coach, and the US has a lot of potential. So they did really well there to get Pochettino. But also fit is important, cultural fit. So I think you need to look at how the coach operates, whether his philosophy in terms of how to play the game aligns with what you see as the philosophy of your club as well. And also it helps if the incoming coach has connections that can be easily plugged into. And if you think about this Poch situation specifically, we've mentioned the overlap with Emma Hayes at Chelsea. But one thing we haven't mentioned yet, which I think probably would have been pretty instrumental in getting Poch to come across, was the sporting director on the men's side, Matt Crocker, being at Southampton with Poch, back in the day. So the link there, the fit there, probably made it easier for the US to be confident that they're making a good hire, and also easier for Poch to think he was confident it was a good move for him as well.
Now, hiring a manager like Mauricio Pochettino is going to have an impact on any club or federation. But I want to get a better understanding of his impact on the team specifically. How is the team going to play? What is his philosophy? And what can we expect from this team leading up to the 2026 World Cup?
Yeah, well, first and foremost is that you've probably got a new coach kind of kick, right? You've got a new coach coming in. He's going to be high level. I think you'll find he's going to be a little bit more authoritarian than probably Greg was. I know the players like Greg. I think he's going to be very specific and defined in how he wants to play. I don't think there's going to be too many wrinkles or too many different ways of playing. I think there's not really much time for that. I think he comes in, he's very clear and concise about how he wants to play. He will hold accountable the players very highly. I think that's good for these players, and I think the players have almost come out and said that, right? That we need someone to take us by the scruff of the neck and tell us what to do. And I think, that being said, I think Pochettino is probably primed to do that. As I say, there's probably going to be a little bit of experimenting, right, before, in these first couple of games, these first couple of windows. But the players will know that they need to be on the game. There'll be players that are regular starters that are probably now looking over the shoulder, and there'll players that are being on the bubble that, may fit Pochettino's style more than others. And so I think it'll be a kind of a blank slate for most of the players, and most of the players, I'm sure, will be itching and ready to go. But I think just the change, just the freshness, probably will take Pochettino through the first year of this cycle. And then, when I went through something similar when Tom Simoni was hired, and then we hired the US Soccer hired Jill, and we were through a cycle. It wasn't too dissimilar in terms of the cycle that we're in. It may have even been less. But I'm sure in that first meeting, of which there'll be a quite a large group and squad of players, there will be X amount of days until the World Cup first game, X amount of training sessions, X amount of recovery sessions, and this is where we need to be. And in every session that they have and every camp that they'll have, probably these will be reverberated to the players. We now have this amount of time, this amount of sessions. You need to be at this level. And all that planning and preparation will, as I say, 95% of it, is research and planning for that 5% that the players really need to take in. And I think, as I say, they have enough time. And I think, I think they'll be fine. But, tournament play is ruthless. And I think getting into that mindset of the journey, the commitment as a group to win, but also to win for each other. That's where the culture will be kind of driven. And I think, as I say, the style of play will probably suit that as well, right? They're probably going to be aggressive, front foot. The players will be up for it. They'll be chomping at the bit, ready to go. And, the fact that they're not doing that every single day in a normal, training club environment, I don't think Pochettino is going to have any issues getting these guys up for a World Cup at all. Yeah, well, I'm sure in terms of the interview process, he's going to have highlighted players that are going to be essential for his system. Those players, I think, will be crucial to how he wants to play, given the fact that he probably will have the training methodology in mind and the development in mind and how he wants to communicate his skills and tactics to these players. So he'll have players in mind that absolutely he'll want in his squad to fit his system. Primarily, I think you'll probably end up seeing a 4-back. I think the outside backs will be aggressive, which, obviously in Robinson's case, you have one there. I think, Tyler Adams will be a critical addition to that group. I think he needs to get fit. I think you will see a very athletic team. I think you'll see a team that covers ground. I think you'll see a team that has high pressing cues from his forwards. Repeatable sprints, closing very compact, but closing kind of space down, working behind the ball as well as with the ball. Not probably too dissimilar, but maybe not as aggressive as the way Canada are playing. Because I think players want to play that way, right? On a World Cup stage, they want to be aggressive. These players are machines. They're athletes. They are top athletes. And I think, the US breeds top athletes in general. What it is, it did it with the women's team for years, right? I mean, they used to steamroller over teams just through pure athleticism. You've got Abby Wambach coming at you. You've got Carly Lloyd coming at you. You've got Cheney coming at you. Like, good luck, right? Good luck getting, good luck, bodying those guys, those ladies. So, I think they'll be super athletic. I think they'll be super front foot. Obviously the preparations in terms of what these players are doing in terms of the loads that they're giving them. Every player will probably be monitored in terms of at a club level as well. So now all these kind of backroom staff will be reaching out to clubs and saying, can I see their GPS data for the games? How much load are they doing? How much can we push these players within games? So, and most clubs are happy to kind of give out that information. But I think you'll see a really trying to be a dominant team, not only because that's his style, but also they need to get the fans on board. They need to get the fans along on this journey. And I think it's a fresh reset for US soccer to reinvigorate the fans and get them on board for the next, 18 months or so.
All right. Now that Stewart has covered Pochettino's impact on the team specifically, I wanted to get a better understanding of how Pochettino might affect the commercial side of the game.
I think as it pertains to Pochettino himself, it's not like Messi coming to the US in terms of, there's a focus on Messi and there's merch for Messi. And, Messi was Adidas's #1 selling jersey last year for Inter Miami. So I don't think necessarily anyone's going to be, buying many more Pochettino branded stuff because Poch has come into the US. But I think he's certainly a welcome addition in terms of creating the expectation of success, creating the buzz around that, which then filters down first through to USSF. I'd expect they're going to see significant increase in their merch sales and their revenues and their sponsorship opportunities, given the high profile nature of him as a coach. I think they're going to see sponsors wanting to engage more because I think sponsors always want to get their name associated with a winning team, and so there is that aspect to it as well. The expectation of success is also a driver of financial success as well. And then, as I said at the top of the call, there's the trickle down effect to the other rest of the soccer ecosystem, the MLS, the USL, the NWSL, all of those areas, benefit from increased engagement in soccer that having Pochettino and the excitement around having him run the men's national team can provide. And I think we should also, I know we're talking about Poch here, but I think we should also mention Emma Hayes on the women's side as well. I think she's also a top class coach, probably one of, if not the best female coaches for women's sport in the world. And so having two coaches of that caliber, I think surely drives engagement in the US for soccer, which I think is going to be financially beneficial for both the federation and the rest of the ecosystem.
Now, the next thing I discussed with Stewart is the two key drawbacks that I believe might actually affect Pochettino's hiring for the US men's national team. The first being timing. We are less than 2 years away from the World Cup. And the second being the lack of competition. Obviously, most teams will be in the qualifying stages while the US has already qualified. So how are they able to find competitive friendlies during that time? And will this actually hinder Pochettino's capabilities of what he can do with the US men's national team?
Yeah, I don't buy the time issue. I don't buy the time issue simply because, the level of quality that these guys are training at, the information now that can be processed digitally, everything now is immediate. There is so much information, video, data that you can ingest very quickly. I think the timing is actually fine. I think there are something like 8 FIFA cycles or FIFA dates that there are leading up to the World Cup now, 21 months. I think the biggest thing for Pochettino now would be, the cycle is gonna start, right? His assistants will be working overtime. They'll be visiting these players. They will have an idea of the core group of who's going to be in that World Cup for sure. They will have presented that information and what they know about these players and their best positions and best spots. And how to attack and build a squad that is not only fit for purpose technically, but culturally as well. And there's been a lot of talk about culture and things like that. When you get into a World Cup cycle, let's say you are 4 weeks, let's say you go all the way, you're basically a month right into a really intense period whereby you're traveling. Which the US won't have to do a lot of because they'll be based out of the West Coast, I think, for all their group games. So they're not traveling a lot, right? They'll probably have a 2-week window period at least whereby they're training at the same training base. That will all be set. They'll know where they're going. The resources will be off the chart. And so I actually think that it will be quite comfortable for Pochettino to come in and work with the resources that they have at US Soccer. The big thing that they will need is to be ruthlessly efficient with the information that they've got. And I think the support system in US is fantastic for that. They've got a very good data analysis system, a very good, video process whereby, these clips, these montages of how teams want to play. There's going to be different meetings that are set up over Zoom, back four meetings, unit meetings, striker meetings, maybe some training sessions that even before they've even got to a camp, all these players will be up to date with in terms of how they want to play. So
is that comparable to the Premier League and to what Pochettino's used to, like the level of in depth and how secure that is? Yeah.
The biggest thing, though, the biggest thing and difference is that you don't get to work with these players on a day in, day out
Right.
basis. So 95% of the work that you will do as a scout leading up to a game, leading up to a tournament, you won't use. Right now, US Soccer will be building databases of all the African teams, all the Oceania teams, all these different teams and video analysis databases of potentially who they're going to play. And all these videos, because they have time, they'll all be reeled over, watched, how teams play. They'll have a template. Pochettino, I'm sure, has a template of how he scouts the opposition, how he likes to deliver his feedback to players in meetings. And those meetings will be so concise in terms of when they get to the first camp. And it will be, the first camp will be the basics, right? What we want our defense to do. Do we want to build out to the back? Where we want to pressing triggers. That will be the basis of, I'm sure, the style of play that he wants, which I think he will go quite aggressive. I think he'll go front foot. I think you need to go front foot when you're playing at a World Cup that is at home. You need to bring the crowd along with you, right? The crowd have been up and down. I think US Soccer, and you allude to the fact that there's no qualification process. Where's the pressure going to come from? How can Pochettino figure out which player can he rely on when there's 75,000 fans screaming in a stadium? And this is on US Soccer, I think, as well. They need to probably do a better job of making sure all those stadiums in the lead up need to be full. So this is kind of cut ticket prices. This is not actually probably a good kind of sell for US Soccer, but they need to make sure those stadiums are full and bring the crowd along with them so that they use that momentum moving into the World Cup, because the crowds will get on their side. They absolutely will do. They did it for the women's World Cups, and they'll do it for the men's. But they need to get off onto a good foot and be aggressive, and I'm sure they will be. But again, they really do need to take advantage of home advantage, to be fair.
Now, while we're on the topic of drawbacks, this might be a little controversial, but I truly don't think Pochettino has been capable at the highest levels. Pochettino has no real trophies at the continental or international level, and he actually has no international experience. So my question to Stewart was, is his time in the Premier League, in Liga, and is it transferable, and is that experience transferable to the US men's national team and leading them in the 2026 World Cup?
Yeah, I think he'll be fine with it. I think he'll probably actually relish it as well. Someone who is, as an analytical as Pochettino and his group are said to be, I think the actual time between these sessions and not having that, day-to-day grind of the training sessions will help him. I think it will be international experience is unique. And the tournament, we're not going to find that out until we get to the tournament, how he handles that. But I think from a coaching point of view, as I say, he's going to be ruthlessly efficient with how he sets up his sessions, with how he sets up his feedback. As I say, they're going to be able to have multiple levels of feedback when they're out of camp as well, right? So they're going to be having back four meetings when players are in France, Spain, MLS, and they're going to be talking on a weekly basis to the players and the coaching staff. And in the background, you've got this behemoth of a kind of US Soccer resource that is helping him along the way. It's the biggest thing that US Soccer can do now is actually provide Pochettino with the resources that he needs and wants, I think. They don't have time to argue about, what system they will use in terms of video analysis and things like that. They just need to be able to get into those processes right away, and I'm sure they will do that. But I think, for sure, you're only going to get to how he handles it when we get into the World Cup actual event. But I don't think this is going to faze him. I think he's got the experience. I think it will actually help him because he will actually be able to structure his team in a way that he wants to structure them. It's pretty difficult to structure a team around Messi, Neymar, and Mbappe if you're looking to press from the front. Like, those guys aren't going to do it. So I think he's proved also by winning in those environments that he can actually adapt. And so I think you'll probably find it playing a similar way that he did with Spurs in terms of structured, organised, aggressive, forwards making dynamic runs, outside backs being very aggressive. And I think you'll see a very, very structured, athletic, high-tempo team come the first game.
Next up, we are going to hop back in with Daniel and discuss Pochettino's contract. Is the salary compensation fair? And why was some of it donated by founder and CEO of Citadel, Ken Griffin?
So I think comp, again, not just in the sports world, but in any world, is a function of supply and demand. If you think about other candidates that have been in the mix to be the US national team coach, I would personally argue that Poch is the best candidate in terms of reputation, in terms of what he's done, in terms of what he's achieved. Do I think that if he had gone to Bayern Munich or some other large European team, he would have got similar comp? Probably. Maybe not quite as much, but probably. So in reality, I think if the USSF wanted to have Poch or a coach the equivalent of Poch, I know Klopp was mentioned at some point as well. But if they want to fish in that pond in terms of getting that caliber of coach, then you have to pay the price for it. So I don't get too exercised about what his salary is. I think it's probably about around market for where he would be if he was at a top club team like a Bayern Munich or a Barcelona or somewhere like that. Again, slightly different to Europe. The way soccer is set up in the US is as far as I'm aware, the US Soccer is a 501c3 non-profit, so they have to rely on donations to get funded as well as other revenue opportunities like sponsorship. So I don't think a donation coming in that happens to pay the salary of Poch is anything to make a special note of. I think that from what I hear, they're fundraising from many different avenues all the time. So but that level of fundraising allows them to get Poch. On the flip side, think about the English FA, the German Fußballbund. As far as I'm aware, they get government funding, and I don't think US Soccer gets government funding either. So you have to plug the gap somehow, and through donations as a non-profit is how they have to do it, I guess.
Obviously, we've been discussing the men's national team a lot, and I also wanted to touch on the women's national team. Obviously, Emma Hayes was a huge influence on Pochettino joining the federation, and I also wanted to discuss with Stewart what the men's national team can learn from the women's national team.
Yeah, I think, first and foremost, I think it's great that, it's really convenient that relationship is already there, right? I think I worked with Emma a little bit when she was at Chicago Red Stars. She probably won't remember me, but when we were with Prozone, they were actually the first women's team in NWSL at the time, a former version of it to use the system. And obviously, she's had a really, really good and successful career and won the Olympics straight off the bat. I think just knowing the dynamics of how US soccer works, maybe some of the bureaucracy that goes on with it. But I think they're in a really, really powerful position now. I think soccer. I think they've got arguably one of the best coaches on the women's side that has almost got a 6-month headway, right, in terms of being actually in that environment. Now bringing in probably one of her friends and confidants in Pochettino that she can relay that information to. So I think it's really fresh. I think there's going to be a lot of new ideas there, and I'm sure they will they will bounce off each other. Not necessarily on tactics, but just on processes in terms of how things are done at US Soccer, what's worked, what's not. Where to go for training camps, little things like these that you don't necessarily get to see in terms of the planning and the precursor for the event. There's a huge amount of planning that goes into organizing training camps, training times, all the nutrition and things like that. And I think time zones and surfaces and things like that. All these things, Emma Hayes will have down to a T. And I'm pretty sure that, she will be, pointing these things out. That's a fantastic facility. This person on your staff, you need this person, or, these, go and train here. Have a. This is what we do on the women's side for our video analysis and things like that. Because at the time, certainly when I was there, they were way ahead of the men's in terms of using data analysis. So I don't think that's going to be too much of a shift for Pochettino, but I think certainly having somebody like Emma Hayes there to pull on for those kind of finer details, and again, a high-level coach, I think will be invaluable for Pochettino and his staff.
Now that we have discussed the relationship between the women's national team and the men's national team, I also wanted to discuss the relationship between MLS and the US Soccer Federation. Stewart was a part of DC United for multiple years, so I asked him about his relationship with the Federation during that time, and also what it might be like now under the Pochettino era.
Yeah, I think there's always been, somewhat of a symbiotic relationship between, MLS and US Soccer. I think in general, though, the underlying premise was that, when MLS was doing quite well, the national team would do quite well. And I think when I first started out, there was a really nice blend of good MLS experienced players that were plying their trade in Europe, and MLS regulars. When I started, you had Tim Howard, Landon Donovan, Michael Bradley. They were all playing for good teams in Europe. Clint Dempsey, Brian McBride. They were all playing for good teams in Europe. And that also, when those guys started to come back, that also kind of raised the profile of the league in MLS. I think now what you've got essentially when the Jurgen cycle was, he was obviously trying to push a lot of these players, the better players, out to go and play in Europe, right? Which and bring in a lot of the kind of the dual nationals, which some he did very successfully, by the way. And I think, but during that kind of period, I think there was maybe a little bit of a disconnect between what MLS wanted to do and the needs and the wants of US soccer. And, the way I think MLS have certainly combated that more recently is, tweaking some of the rules, tweaking some of the, the roster manipulations and things like that you can do, putting more money into the league, bringing in more of these kind of younger players. MLS is still a selling league, but at the same time, it is a selling league. It's still selling good players to Europe, and I think it's starting to get on a more of an upward trajectory, whereby MLS is still viewed, I think, by many as being quite inferior. I think a lot of the new coaches that come in, certainly, Pochettino was one. He'll get to see firsthand what the quality of MLS is like, and I think he will be quite surprised. So I think it's in a bit of a tipping period now, whereby MLS needs to start or continue to sell good players. Even USL now, there are players starting to move from USL to Europe. And that then I think is only good for the national team as a whole, right? Because you've got these different kind of departments of US soccer. You've got, the arm of the commercial arm, whereby, we need to really maximize, we need to make money, we need to really push from that perspective. But I think that the only way that the league or MLS is going to grow is to put the product on the field. And I think putting the product on the field will only then lead to a better national team. And I think probably what you'll find at this World Cup is that you have a blend of good MLS players and good young players that are playing in Europe. And I think that's probably the right way to go right now. So I think that, to kind of roundabout answer your question, I think that, that relationship has always been there, but I think it works best when both MLS if MLS is doing well, I think the national team will do well. And again, now I think they're in a position, US Soccer and MLS, is that they've probably got, in totality, the best group of players that they probably could have a pick for. Not necessarily saying they've got the best game winners, right? I don't think they've got the game winners, but I think as a whole and as a group, US Soccer have got a good, probably the best bunch of players that they've ever had. And that's why it's going to be so important for them and so important for Pochettino to get them all on the correct page, make sure he picks the right roster, the right selections, make sure he picks the right substitutes, all these things that are going to go in through his mind come the first game of the World Cup. We won't know until, we get there, but these are the things that you prepare for. And how can I take a group of 25 players for 6 weeks without killing each other and make sure that they are ready and focused for one thing, which is trying to win the World Cup?
Now, during my conversation with Stewart, we discussed the importance of game winners, and he mentioned a crucial game winner, a number 10 in the MLS. He's also Argentinian, and he just might be able to fit in the U.S. men's national team before they host the World Cup in 2026.
I was thinking about this the other day as well, and you've actually got a certain Argentinian number 10 at Cincinnati who used to be a D.C. United player in Lucho Acosta, that I think he's pretty close, if not already, has his citizenship. So I think it'd be really, I think it'd be really interesting. He's a game winner in itself, right? So
that's only just clicked now, and obviously Pochettino being Argentinian, I haven't even thought of that.
Right. So again, it's they were fighting US Soccer to get. I'm pretty sure they were fighting to get him naturalized pretty quickly, and so having an Argentine coach there as well. You never know, right? I think they are missing a game winner or two for sure. I think it's hard to put all the emphasis on Pulisic. I think the pressure that he's under to say he's the guy. Obviously because he's playing for AC Milan, and I think there's going to be a real need to attack this as a group and win by committee, which I think they have the players to do. Especially when you giving all the other factors of, they're not going to be traveling. They're going to have a home base. They're never going to really have to travel to Mexico or Canada. All the other teams are going to be flying across different time zones. They're not going to be moving anywhere out of the home base for the first 2 weeks or 4 weeks. So it's really about maximizing the totality of your group and every single facet of a World Cup cycle when you first step foot in your hotel has to be clearly defined, prepared for. Otherwise, the players will smell it, and you only need one person to cause an issue, and it's hard. So all the planning and all the emphasis will be, how can I take the best group of players that I can manage to win a World Cup with the least possible hassle, because that plays into it. And I'm sure getting to know these players will be priority for the coach in the first instance, and how they can handle pressure. Are they a good teammate? Are they a good squad player that he's never going to play within the group but keeps the morale up, and he's a good trainer? All these things will be on Pochettino's mind, I'm sure, come his first session.
Now, as we wrap things up for this episode, I wanted to ask Stewart and Dan a hypothetical question. Now that Pochettino has been hired, if they were in charge of US Soccer, what decisions would they now make leading up to hosting the World Cup in 2026?
So the business side, obviously, we're hosting the World Cup, and it's got to go off without a hitch. So you would double down on making sure operations are in good shape. Liaise with the stadium hosts, very early to get expectations as to how you want the games to be run, and how you want the games to look. And then over and above that, it's about, revenue generation. The World Cup is, along with the Olympics, the biggest sporting event in the world. And so you have to make the most of all these revenue generation, aspects that you have. Because you probably, you get a World Cup once every 30, 40 years if you're lucky. So this is a one-off opportunity to really generate revenue and also generate indirect revenue by putting soccer on the map. So you just got to be operationally and from a business perspective, commercially, fully aware of all the levers you can pull to make this a success.
Well, first of all, I think the primary role of US Soccer now is support, right? US Soccer is acting somewhat as a sporting director, right, to the new coaching and staff. I'm sure there'll be many meetings in terms of logistics and things like that, in terms of how, planning out the next kind of 6 to 12 months in terms of where the training is going to be, where they're going to train in terms of making the best conditions and climates, situations that will mimic those at a World Cup. It's going to be in the summer. It's going to be hot. I'm pretty sure they'll be training in some, in the next probably 6 months, they'll be training in places that have kind of humidity. And so I think the logistics in terms of getting the team ready to be exposed to similar environments that they will do at the World Cup is important. But also just things like, travel and where to stay and what hotels are staying at, facilities, all these things are meticulously important. The surface of the fields that they're playing on, the type of grass that will be used at these stadiums. All of this information will be probably firsthand, right, to the US. FIFA will control kind of the stadium logistics, but everything around that is open to US Soccer. So I think getting the manager comfortable with the schedule is important. Then it will be, the interaction with the players. It will be interaction with the coaches. It will be interactions with team administrators and getting familiar with, how those guys operate, building that kind of culture within as well in terms of, getting on board. I heard that Pochettino is going to live in the United States rather than commute, which I think is really good, right? It shows commitment. Which, if I'm paying $6 million for a coach, I want to see a little bit of commitment. But I think that's smart. And, he's come out in the press conference and said, listen, we're going to win it. We've done all the right things. And so in the first instance, it seems as though this is a good relationship. I mean, I believe that, Matt Crocker has had a previous relationship with Pochettino at Southampton, even if in a short period. So that really is important. It's about getting relationships, being on the same page, and working out and ironing out certainly the next kind of 3 months or through the next kind of 2 FIFA windows, because there's going to be so much information that Pochettino will want to deliver to the players. It's going to be a lot of communication, an efficient communication. So once that has kind of been done, I think the wheels kind of just churn and you're on that kind of cruise control then. So all ironing out the little variable things that could go wrong further down the line, let's get them out of the way now. Mm-hmm. This is how we're going to do it. This is how I work US Soccer. This is how I want to work. Tell me what I can do and what I can't. And I think that is probably the next kind of two FIFA windows.
And while we're on the topic of hypothetical questions, I asked them one more hypothetical question. I wanted to know, if the U.S. win the World Cup in 2026, what impact does that have on the nation?
It's going to, I think, turbocharge all of the stuff we've been talking about in terms of interest in the game. I think the previous modern era best was quarterfinals, which I think the team is more than capable of achieving. But you never know. I mean, you think about obviously England, Argentina, Spain, probably Germany, probably Portugal, probably Brazil are going to be pretty strong. And so reaching or winning the final is going to be a tough job. But who knows? I mean, you think about the European Championships, I think it was 2012 or maybe 2008, where Greece won, and obviously nobody was expecting that. So these things do happen, and I think if the US does win the World Cup, it'll be great. And I think the buzz around US soccer, both the national team and at all levels of the ecosystem, from the MLS through the USL to other leagues, all the way down to AYSO and grassroots youth involvement, is going to go through the roof. You see the engagement that, for example, Messi has created in the US. Being in Miami, I go to my kids' elementary school, and some of them, there's a bunch of kids wearing NFL jerseys, but there's a significant bunch of kids wearing soccer jerseys, and most of them are Messi jerseys. So everyone likes associating with a star or a winner, and if the US wins the World Cup, they'll all be stars, they'll all be winners, and I think the engagement will go through the roof.
I think for the grassroots level of the game, in turn for the coaching levels of the game, soccer now, I believe, in 18 to 25-year-olds is the most popular sport in the US. That's got to be kind of the demographic that US soccer is hoping to push. I think you'll find a lot of content around bringing in the Hispanic and Latino markets, especially due to obviously the coach and him being bilingual. And I think you'll find that a huge push in terms of trying to kind of connect those markets, even in markets that are not currently connected. But obviously, the level from a grassroots level, from the pyramid, changes drastically, right? I think even now, players are wanting to come and play in MLS. And they're seeing the fact that they can potentially, as a younger player, come into MLS and in 2 years' time play in the US, even for a different country, at a World Cup. So I think US soccer will hit the younger demographic really hard. I have no hesitation in thinking this will be the biggest World Cup by far in terms of commercial and sponsorship opportunities for US soccer, especially cottoning onto and latching onto Leagues Cup and the kind of the MLS version of that right now. They're going to be stadiums that are 75, 80,000 full. They're going to be paying $10 for a hot dog. You work out the math. I think the 94 World Cup, I think, is still the most populated World Cup by people attending at the stadium. And there's the last, 2 years ago, there's probably an extra 10 games at the World Cup, and still that 94 World Cup per person attending is still the highest. So, you think about what's going to happen now when every stadium is going to be 70. It's going to be an absolute barnstormer. It's going to be one of the biggest events, ever. On a global scale. So, listen, there's a lot of people going to be making a lot of money off that, and I hope that that some of that is obviously filtered back into the growing of the game. I'm sure it will be, but really exciting times. And as I say, whereas the US Soccer and Pochettino have to maximize the on-field presence and maximize and G up the crowd in order to kind of get those bums on seats, for the World Cup. But listen, if it's anything like, my experience with the women, I think it'll be a brilliant event and one which, will be special. And you can say, hopefully I was there, and I'm sure the partying will go on for weeks, if not months after, and victory tours and things like that, which we can make a lot more money on and put a lot more money into the game, and that's how it works, right? So I think anything better than a quarterfinal, I think, will be fantastic. I think the US behind doors will probably be hoping for a quarterfinal, and then you're really hoping that you can get the fans behind you and propel you to anything else, because I think anything else there is probably a bonus. But they've got a chance. On home soil, anything can happen.
Now, obviously, win or lose, the impact of the World Cup will be absolutely massive for the U.S. I wanted to ask Dan specifically, as he has quite a bit of skin in the game. We spoke previously about some of his involvements within the U.S. soccer landscape. I wanted to know how him and his team are preparing for a once-in-a-lifetime tournament like this.
The major focus for the World Cup for our teams is probably in Brooklyn, but focusing on engagement, focusing on getting people to come to games, maybe for the first time, and having watch parties for road games, as well as Copa America that just happened, and also for the World Cup as well, getting people engaged with the national team, but within the confines of the Brooklyn environment. That's I think that's one way to build a fan base, and it's a great way to build a fan base and capitalize on the interest in the secular interest in soccer that we're expecting to see. And it's over and above that, again, in addition to building a fan base and in addition to increasing the number of people that become Brooklyn fans, it's also about capitalizing on sponsorship revenue opportunities. The higher profile of the game as a result of the World Cup should result in more sponsorship opportunities for our team, because we're all part of this ecosystem that should be growing thanks to the catalyst that is the World Cup. So it's really, again, similar to the hypothetical of me being in charge of US Soccer to increase revenues and capitalize on a once in a generation event. It's the same at the club level as well, and I'd expect all soccer teams and franchises and clubs to be doing the same kind of thing in terms of using this one-off opportunity to really increase engagement in the various teams.
Lastly, I wanted to know from Stewart and Dan their predictions of the lead up to the World Cup itself, and what is the definition of success for the US Soccer Federation?
I think, listen, and again, if you can get out of the group and get to a quarterfinal stage, the planning and the preparation then is really important, because it's the fans get on your side. It's overwhelming, 75,000 people. Anything can happen. It's 90 minutes or 120 minutes, and the attention to detail then is really what matters. First thing is get out of your group. First thing is don't try and win the first game. 65% chance of advancing in the World Cup if you win your first game. Take advantage of the home advantage in your first game, and I think that momentum builds. And as I say, tournament soccer is ruthless, right? I think, and getting off to a good start is vitally important, But then as you move through the groups, penalties, things like that, practicing penalties, all these things that they'll probably do as you start to do and start to add on to a training session as you get through the camps. It becomes really fine details, and the level of quality of the teams at that level is probably not that much. Like when it comes down to it, it's not that much. And the attention to detail, as I say, I keep harping on about that, the preparation, the culture, it can really take you forward, and who knows. But I think the benchmark will be quarterfinal behind closed doors. And I think, when he says he wants to win it, I believe him. I think he probably wants to win it.
Sure. So I think there's going to be a bounce. I think Panama is going to be a big game, the next game. And the Mexico away game is obviously always something the players are up for with the rivalry. Panama is important because, remember, the Copa America, that was probably the result that was less than expected and caused the group stage exit. So I think that the team and the players will be fired up for both games, and I think they'll get a good result. In terms of World Cup, I actually think I think Poch is pretty spot on. I think quarterfinals is realistic, but of course, you got to aim as high as you can, and I think I laud Poch's ambition for saying the final. I don't think you aim low; you aim high and do as best you can.
All right, you have made it to the end of this week's episode. If you have made it this far, thank you for listening or watching. If you'd like to help us out in any way, feel free to comment down below your feedback, your thoughts on this style of episode, and your thoughts on Pochettino being hired by the US Soccer Federation as the men's national team head coach. If you would like to support us in any other way, feel free to like and share the episode on YouTube, or if you're listening in on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, feel free to leave us a 5-star review. It helps us absolutely massively in terms of the algorithm. And I want to say thanks again for listening in on this week's episode, and we'll see you next week.